In 1973, the man who co-discovered the structure of DNA proposed, in a real scientific paper, that life on Earth might have been deliberately seeded here by another civilization. Francis Crick called it directed panspermia. 50 years later, scientists just did something that makes that old idea feel strangely relevant again. They turned DNA into a working piece of computer hardware. Here's what actually happened. Researchers at Penn State built a memory device, specifically a memristor, a component whose resistance changes based on the electrical current that's passed through it before, which makes it useful for both storing memory and mimicking how neurons work. By doping synthetic DNA with silver nanoparticles and layering it with a semiconductor material called the quasi-2D-perovskite. The result runs on less than 0.1 volts. For comparison, a standard US wall outlet delivers 120 volts. This device operates on roughly 1,000th of that. Power density measured in at just 0.01 watts per square centimeter. A record low for this category of device. And it wasn't fragile lab-only stuff. The device held up at temperatures near 250 degrees Fahrenheit and stayed stable at room temperature for more than 6 weeks straight. Which matters a lot because perovskite materials are usually notorious for falling apart fast. And it's specifically synthetic DNA that makes this work, not DNA pulled from a living cell. Natural DNA is floppy and unpredictable at this scale. Short, custom-built synthetic strands are rigid and precise enough that researchers can actually arrange them, like molecular scaffolding, to control exactly how electricity moves through the material. In other words, the same molecule that stores your genetic code is now being engineered strand by strand to store and move data instead. And here's the bold version of what this could mean. Silicon has run computing for roughly 70 years, and it's starting to hit real physical limits. It's expensive to manufacture at scale. It's increasingly energy hungry as chips get denser and transistors are getting hard to shrink any further without hitting the literal size of individual atoms. Biological molecules like DNA are cheap to produce, self-assemble into precise structures with almost no external energy input, and now, apparently, can conduct and store electronic information too. That's a real, serious contender for what comes after silicon. Not science fiction, an actual line of engineering research. Now, the honest part, because this matters. This is one device made in one lab at a research scale. Not a chip sitting inside an actual computer you could buy. Nobody's DNA-powered laptop is shipping next year, or even next decade. What this paper actually proves is narrower than silicon is finished, but it's still real. That synthetic DNA can be engineered into a stable, working piece of electronics, not just a biological blueprint sitting in a cell. That's the proof of concept researchers needed. Turning that into an actual competitive chip is still years, maybe decades of engineering away. So think back to that 1973 paper for a second. Crick and Orgel's whole argument rested on one specific detail: that every living thing on Earth, from bacteria to humans, runs on the exact same molecular code, with no variation. 50 years later, engineers just discovered that same code happens to make surprisingly good computer hardware too. Whatever DNA actually is, and wherever it actually came from, it clearly wasn't built with many limits in mind.